Okay, welcome back. This lecture will be all about kick drums. We're going to learn lots of different types of kick drums, and they're pretty simple to design in Massive. So we will do that in a moment. But first of all, I want to encourage you to, in between these lectures, make sure that you're going into Massive and designing your own sounds and trying to start from scratch and just trying out different sound design techniques that you've been learning, because the purpose of this course is not to just show you specific sounds, but to hopefully give you a well-rounded and thorough understanding of this synthesizer, as well as the underlying principles of sound design. That's how I want you to arrive at the end of this course, is with a better handle on what sound design is and how to accomplish a sound that you hear in your head and put it down on paper. So make sure that you're doing that. All right, enough of that. Let's talk about kick drum synthesis. So we're going to start over here in oscillator 1. And we're going to choose a sine wave and bring the wavetable position down here so that we have a pure sine tone. Sounds like this. Okay, so that's our pure sine tone. And now we need to use some envelopes to modulate the pitch. And that's what's going to give us that nice pure kick drum sound. So the first thing that we're going to do is bring this pitch, the local pitch, all the way up to 64. All the way up to the top. It's very piercingly high. Okay? Now we're going to drop envelope number 1 into the pitch modulation slot and envelope 2 into the other one. And we're going to use both of these envelopes to pull that pitch down in a very short amount of time. So you can drag down this numeral to, I don't know, maybe 30, 40. And this one can come down just a little bit past it, and you can adjust those to taste in a moment. So let's design these envelopes now. So envelope 1 will be using no attack, and so bring your attack level down because we want this logarithmic curve upward. Bring your sustain level up, and that's maybe okay for the decay. Bring this release down. Okay. Now envelope 2, we're going to use pretty much the same shape. So let's go back to envelope 1, choose copy, and then paste it here. But we're going to have a much shorter decay time. So you can adjust these to your own taste if you want to have so you can have these land pretty much wherever you want. I'm going to have a little bit smaller of a spread there. Now you'll notice that little click at the beginning and the blip at the end. That presents us with a problem here. And I have to give credit where credit is due to Josh at thedeltadeep.com for solving this problem that I was having, and it was driving me crazy about the and it has to do with the structure of the envelopes in Massive, how there's always a minute attack problem and release. So if we go to our default envelope that's modulating the amplitude, you'll notice even if we turn the attack all the way down and the release all the way down, sustain is up, we don't have a perfect right angle here. We still have a small attack and a small release. That means that those first few milliseconds are actually being ramped up rather than a purely immediate attack. And then we're also getting a little bit of pull off at the end. So I learned through Josh at the deltadeep.com that there is a sort of a cool hack that you can do to get around this. And then I have my own little hacks that I have added on to this as well. So I want to give a shout out to the deltadeep.com for solving this problem. So the way around this problem is to mute this amplitude modulator. That means that we're not using the envelope, we're just doing on and off. And that gives us that hard attack, but you'll also hear the little bit of the squelchy clip at the end when I release the key. We don't want that. That sounds amateur. So this is the way around it. We're going to drop LFO number 5 into the amplitude and create the modulation range downward. Now we're going to choose, the performer here, and we're going to create a curve that will sort of act like an envelope for this amplitude knob. It's not an envelope, it's an LFO, well, the performer really, but we're going to sort of fake it to act like an envelope on this amplitude. Because if we dropped an envelope, for example, envelope 3 into here, and we wanted to have a short attack, well, sorry, you still have some attack. Okay, so we're going to use a little hack here. And we're going to just drag all of these down to the bottom. And then we're going to create a little ramp with our load curve. So choose this shape. And then maybe on number 3, you can have this ramp go all the way up. And then we'll choose the straight line again. And just bring this all the way across the top. So what's happening now is this ramp is negatively modulating the amplitude knob. So the amplitude knob starts at full volume down here, and then sweeps down to 0, and then continues on 0. There's a couple of issues with this, so let's talk about them. So this will sound sort of like this. You can hear it decay like that. Now the rate knob will determine that decay time. You can have it be very short like this. A little bit longer. The only issue with this is since the performer is a sequencer, so if I hold my note down too long, you'll hear it occur again at the beginning. Just like that, you can see it moving through the sequencer. So I don't want that, so I'm going to show you a hack around that in just a moment. And the other issue is that you need to make sure that your MIDI note lasts long enough to go over this ramp. Because if I let go before it does, then we're solving no problem. So I have to let go of my MIDI note after it gets to 4. And that only really becomes an issue when you're actually putting your MIDI information into your software, like Logic or Cubase or whatever. So, but just remember that otherwise you're going to have a problem. So how do we stop it from looping? Well, we're going to use the crossfade fader here, and we're going to use an envelope to sweep this down to the bottom performer, which we will use, we'll choose the load curve, use the straight line, and have it go across the top. Because remember, the full amplitude on these steps equals the amplitude being down at the bottom here. So we're sort of in reverse. We're inverted. So now we need to use an envelope. So let's use envelope 3. Put it here. And create our modulation range this way. Okay, so we've dropped envelope 3 in there, and now we need to design this envelope. So it's going to be similar to number 2 and 3, but with a little bit of delay. So I'm just going to copy envelope number 2, paste it into envelope number 3 like this. I'm going to shorten the decay time and then bring a little delay, because this delay knob means that we're telling this fader to not drop down until it's gotten past this number 3 step. So it's a little convoluted, but so this is not short enough or long enough. There we go. So I have a nice long delay time, a little bit longer decay time. And that means that once my ramp occurs like this crossfade sequencer will move down to the bottom and alight here on this performer, which means that I won't be looping that attack. Okay. So if it just continues through, then I don't have that problem. So that's a little bit convoluted, like I said, but it works if you're running into that problem. One other thing to mention before we start changing the character of the kick drum is you can use this little envelope hack that I found to create a really cool kick-bass pairing. So rather than having the amplitude of these steps in the bottom performer up at full, you can reduce them a little bit, maybe about halfway even. And you can shorten the length of this overall sequence if you want, so you don't have to deal with those other. And it's kind of tough to get these lined up perfectly. So we want to shorten. Let's lift these up a bit. And we need to shorten that delay time a little bit. So you can hear that bass sound sort of swelling in right after the kick. And that's a kind of a cool way to add that kick bass. It sounds really good within a production. And you'll hear a little bit more character of that with when we start changing the wavetables. But if we look back at this, again, just to review what's going on here. There we go. So the amplitude is swelling in from the top down. So it's full amplitude. This is our sort of fake envelope, full amplitude, and then it's ramping downward to the bottom here. And right after this ramp downward, our crossfader moves down to the bottom. And that means that once it passes this ramp, because of the delay in this envelope, we move down to the bottom level performer, in which there's a little bit of room here of amplitude, and so that we can keep some of that sort of pure bass tone. So we have that attack with the drop and then a little bit of bass left over. Actually, I'm doing the opposite. This needs to be about here. Okay, so now let's play around with some different kick drum sounds. So if we just change the wavetable from sine to square, you'll hear how dramatic the difference is. Reduce this delay a little bit. So that's pretty cool. Now we can also use one of these envelopes to modulate the wavetable position so that we're sweeping over the course of this wavetable. That way you have that nice distorted fuzzy sound at the beginning with the attack of the kick, but then it over the course of the envelope moves down to the pure sine wave. You can, of course, do the opposite if you choose. Or you can add this into the intensity knob as well. So that way you just have a nice sharp attack and a pretty subtle decay. Or you can do this backwards, which gives you a little bit more of a woody kind of sound. So when you start scrolling through these wavetables, you'll see just how many different options you have for different sounds. Nice distorted sounds here. And then you can mute this modulation if you just want to hear it with the full wavetable position. It's kind of a cool talky sort of sound. So look at how many options you have just by cycling through these wavetables. That's a nice clean sound there. And then if you want to, you can also play with some of these other effects here. Like we can throw on a scream filter. And then put our envelope here in the cutoff mod. Adjust some of these parameters. Okay, so that's one way to do it. You can try adding a little distortion with the sine shaper and then choosing your routing page where this is going to go. So since we're going to filter 2, maybe put insert number 1 right after filter 2. Use a dimension expander. To just widen up that sound a little bit. So there's lots of different options. And then make sure that you're playing with your EQ a little bit too, unless you're also using the equalization within your DAW. But you know, if you want to just take out some of the mids, for example, you can lower the boost here. Okay, so that is the basic way of creating a kick drum. And we've also talked about sort of hacking the system with the performer to modulate the amplitude of the oscillator, thanks to the deltadeep.com. Using another envelope to crossfade in between the two of these so that you can have some of that residual bass tone in there, which is pretty cool. So that's pretty basic, but it's a lot of fun. So play around with that, come up with some crazy kick drums, and we'll see you in the next lecture.